A few months ago, I went outside to check the mail. I have one of those really old mailboxes that is right outside the house. I leafed through the mail. It was all bills and filers and magazines. Then I noticed something else at the bottom of the mailbox. A videotape. Now, something I find in the mailbox like bugs, garbage, and things like that. A few years back, we had found a squirrel and made a nest in there. But a videotape. Really? I picked it up and looked at it. It looked like a normal videotape. I looked at the side. There was a shiny sticker of a butterfly on it. I peeked into the mailbox, hoping to find some explanation for this videotape, but found nothing. I walked inside and set up my VCR, which had been collecting dust by then. I inserted the tape in and waited until it started finished rewinding. When it was finished, I pressed play on the remote. It was 10:30 at night, and I grabbed some popcorn and a soda, plopping myself onto the sofa. I was ready to watch what this mysterious tape was. The video started with one of those WNED indents. I had last seen the incident when I was maybe 6 or 7. What followed was an advert to the theme park Marineland to an old advert of the 1990s. During the advert, the screen kept flashing. I couldn't make out what it was flashing because it only lasted for a quarter of a second. The Maryland ad was cut off and it went to pitch black. It was about to rewind to see what it was flashing when a familiar thing popped up. It was PBS Kids. There was a brief advert for Chuck E. Cheese, and I smiled. I watched my childhood return to me. Suddenly, it faded to what show was coming next. Coming up next, Dragon Tales on PBS Kids. I'm sure most of you know the show Dragon Tales. It's better that you've at least seen 5 episodes to the show before you understand any of this. The intro of this show started. Everything was right, except for there was no sound. It cut off in the middle of the intro into a picture of Max sitting in a chair with the words Dragon Tales crudely written above him in red. The thing that frightened me the most was Max's facial expressions. He was pale and his eyes were tiny. He sat there as if he was trying to smile, but needed to cry. Almost all the expressions of a man about to hang himself. The episode started. It showed an outside view of Max and Emma's house as it always does. The sky was dark red, and the sun was orangish color. Max walked in holding his elbow. "Ow," he explained. "I bumped my elbow onto the table." Emmy stood as she had a frown on her face. "Maybe if you had fucked me then, your elbow wouldn't hurt so much," she replied. I was shocked at what I had just heard. She had said what I thought she had just said. More significantly, there was no credits or episode title. Then Max said, "Emmy, Mommy told us not to say that word." Emmy took a deep breath. Before she could speak, Max screamed, "Don't do it, Emmy," he cried. "I don't want to live through this anymore." Do what? I wondered. What was Emmy going to do? I was starting to get scared at this point. I knew I was about to watch a normal episode of Dragon Tales. They continued their conversation, but the rest was barely audible. Finally, Emmy suggested in a clear voice, "Why don't we go to Dragonland?" The dragon wallpaper was black and bright red. The dragons on the wall had gigantic smiles on their faces. They held each other's hand in hand and chanted, I wish with all my heart to fly with dragons in a land apart." They all arrived in Dragonland. They looked for their friends. They found Ord sitting behind a rock. Max approached him. "Hey, Ord, want to play with my new truck?" he asked. Ord turned around. I could hear bits of radio static. At first, I couldn't hear what the voice was saying, but I began to hear what the man on the radio was saying. What I heard was, "Well, Jim, this is a terrible situation we have here. Police have confirmed the Air Force One was hijacked, few members of Al-Qaeda. The plane crashed into the Statue of Liberty in New York City, the city where President Obama was supposed to appear. We are unsure who else was on the plane, or if there were any casualties. I don't know anything else, but all I can tell you is that the Statue of Liberty is in flames and the plane was carrying President Barack Obama." During the time the radio was playing, Ord was sitting behind the rock. He had no expression on his face. He was just sitting there, lifeless. He wasn't dead, but his face almost looked like it. I thought back Max's expression on his face. Once the static ended, Ord walked away. He was expressionless as he walked in a straight line around Dragonland. The room was bloody red. Ord then gave a slick smile. A gigantic scream erupted out of nowhere. It cut to a zoom in on a photo of a realistic image of a now embassated lord lying dead, with his eyes ripped out and a message carved out in his head. In Ord's blood it said, "Hail Satan." It cut to black at that second. It then faded to a church. The bell rang in a distorted, deep tone. The sky was still blood red. Radio static coming back. Breaking news, the anchorman proclaimed. President Barack Obama is dead. He was killed this afternoon in a plane crash along with Vice President Joe Biden and 55 other government officials. Also on that was rock and roll legend Chuck Berry and 40 others. Air Force One was hijacked by 5 Al-Qaeda members, whose names have not been confirmed. The anchorman's voice shook with terror as he spoke. This is a terrible, shocking day, not only for the United States of America, but for the entire world. The response was, after that, it went to static. It showed paintings on the outside of the church. At that moment, I assumed that this was something to do with the death of Obama. It zoomed in on the coffin. It had photorealistic stuff. The voice of Zach suddenly shouted, "Casey, no!" It cut to black and white video. It was silent except for a random beeping noise. By silent, all you could hear was a film projector running. It showed Casey walking around in a white background. She kept walking, the beeping sound getting louder, and Casey stopped. She walked over towards the screen. I could hear her breathing. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her teeth were broken. Her hair was shaved off. At this point, I thought Casey could hear me. She opened her mouth. What followed was the most ear-piercing sound that I could have ever heard in my life. It wasn't like a scream, but a really messed up beeping sound that was louder than any human could hear. My ears sometimes still ring from that. That's how bad it was. In fact, I'm lucky I'm not deaf. Casey continued to stare at me. I was getting scared at this moment and didn't want to watch anymore. I tried to shut it off. Said Casey in the voice of a crying and choking woman. "We must pray to Satan." Then it faded to black. It faded back to a dragon tune. For those of you who don't know, the format was 2 10-minute episodes and a song in between. I hoped that the nightmare had ended. It didn't. The song was an organ track that began looping. The video quality wasn't very good, so I couldn't see what was really going on. There were about 500 dragons in a gigantic circle chanting, "Casey, Casey, Casey." Casey then smiles and jumps into the fire. The video quality suddenly improving. It shows Casey's flesh burning. She looked at me and proclaimed, "You did this to me," before her skin was burnt to ash and her entire body turned to rubble. It actually showed her being burnt. Suddenly, hundreds of dragons pounced on her remains. They began to scratch at each other. They devoured each other. It showed dragons biting each other's skulls, dragons ripping out flesh of other dragons, and fleshless dragons crying blood. I began to wonder how this was a dragon tune. The scene changed back to Max and Emmy at their house. "I need my truck," exclaimed Max. "Well, hurry up," said Emmy in an angry voice. Max then fell in the toy box he was searching. Emmy, I'm locked. Help me." Max screamed. He was crying, like actually real crying. Emmy screamed, "It's stuck." You could feel the pain as Max panicked to get out. To make a long story short, he didn't. Cut to a gigantic cage. It showed Zach and Wheezy on all fours drinking water from a dish. They began to sing. The singing was muffled, so I couldn't understand their words. After a while, the song became more clear, and the voices of Zach and Wheezy now sounding like an old man with a gruff voice, and a little girl no older than 4. The last verse went something like this. "Praise thy devil, for he is thou. Let him possess unto thou, for pain and torture are we all we can see. It's better you than him and me." Then they paused. The little girl started to cry. It was actual singing, not actual stand-up. The man said in a gruff voice, "I said stand the fuck up so I can rape you again," the man shouted. You could actually hear the man rape the little girl. You could feel her pain as she said she was forced to do something illegal. Her screams and cries echoed. Finally, the screams and cries stopped. "Stand up, you little piece of shit," the man yelled. "I want my mommy," the girl cried. She was screaming. Out of the blue, a loud gunshot rang. The girl continued to scream loudly. 5 shots were fired, whispering in the man's voice, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do with this body?" The video cut to the surveillance camera room. Videos of different angles of the Air Force One crash into the Statue of Liberty. I began to wonder how the girl's rape and murder and the terrorism act both connected together. It cut to pitch black suddenly. A face came out of the shadows. It was a terrifying figure from one of the worst nightmares I had when I was 5. It looked like Satan. His eyes were bulging out and he had a big smile on his face. He opened his mouth and let out an ear-piercing sound that I had heard earlier. I was able to stop the video now. I didn't want to see the face with that terrible demon anymore. I shut off the VCR and stayed up all night on my computer. I threw out the videotape, but after I took some photos of the episode before garbage day, I made sure the video was in the garbage, but it wasn't. I searched the house and it was nowhere to be seen. I never had seen the tape again, and I warn you to never pick up a mysterious videotape you find.